Welcome again, dear students. Myself, Dr. Kareem Ahmed, Assistant Professor, Department of Wildlife Sciences, Aligarh Muslim University, Aligarh. Now, in today's lecture, we will discuss the transboundary issues in biodiversity management or biodiversity conservation. Biodiversity conservation, or we can say biodiversity management across political boundaries, represent one of the most complex challenge in modern conservation. Natural ecosystems, not often I can say to human drawn political boundaries, thus creating some kind of the unique challenge for conservation efforts that require some kind of international cooperation and coordinations for their management and for their conservation. Transboundary, we can say in biodiversity management refers to any natural areas or ecosystems or a habitat that actually extend across national borders or administrative boundaries. So thus we can say managing biodiversity in these regions, we can say often involves coordination and collaboration between the neighboring countries or jurisdictions to address the environmental concerns such as conservation, habitat restoration and species protection. What are the significance of these transboundary ecosystems, or what are the significance of the transboundary conservation or the managements? As we know, biodiversity, first thing we are going to discuss is the importance of the biodiversity hotspots in transboundary ecosystems. Biodiversity hotspots, as we have already discussed the 36 biodiversity hotspots throughout the world. So we can say the biodiversity hotspots often span multiple countries, making, we can say, transboundary conservation is very essential. We can say a prime example of these biodiversity hotspot or transboundary conservation is Eastern Himalayas, a hotspot spanning actually Nepal, Bhutan, India and China, and home to, we can say, rare species like the snow leopard, red pandas. So we can say protected these biodiversity here we can say means addressing ecological needs across the nation boundaries. So we can say for these collaborative frameworks such as transboundary protected areas, biosphere reserves, actually allows the countries to cooperate on habitat protection, resource management and law enforcement. In biodiversity hotspots, we can say transboundary cooperations helps to mitigate some kind of the challenge such as poaching, illegal wildlife trade, habitat fragmentation. We can say joint patrols such as data sharing network and cross-border conservation initiatives also enhance, we can say, enforcements against the poachers and the smugglers. So we can say the transboundary protected areas like the Kalahari transfrontier parks between Botswana and the South Africa demonstrate how actually shared goals and resources can strengthen the wildlife corridors and scale larger habitat necessary for the migratory species. These, we can say, cooperative efforts not only protect the biodiversity, we can say, but also fosters diplomatic relationship and peace building through shared environmental goals. Another importance is maintaining ecological connectivity and habitat integrity. We can say many species such as large mammals, migratory birds, animals require vast interconnected habitats to survive. So we can say the transboundary ecosystems allow animal to move freely, especially for seasonal migration, breeding and to find foods. For instance, we can say animal like elephant, bison and migratory birds travels across borders as a part of their life cycles. So we can say protecting these routes ensure that they have access to resources they need year around for their survivals. Another is the importance of the transboundary ecosystem is to enhance the genetic diversity. We can say the large or interconnected habitats allow greater genetic exchange between populations. This genetic diversity actually strengthens the resilience of the species by reducing the risk of inbreeding and making population more adaptable to environmental change. So we can say the genetic diversity is especially crucial for the species under pressure from habitat loss and climate change. So we can say connected ecosystems help maintain healthy population sizes which contribute to greater overall biodiversity. Another we can say importance is resilience against climate change. As we know, climate change is causing shift in habitat and the range of the species. So we can say animals and the plants are moving towards the higher altitudes or latitudes as the temperature rises, meaning they actually often cross national borders. So we can say the transboundary conservation actually allows species the freedom to adapt to changing condition, providing corridors and buffer zones that enable them to reach new suitable habitat in response to the shifting climates. So another importance or other significance of we can say this transboundary ecosystem is protecting or protection of the ecosystem services. As we know, the transboundary ecosystems provide some kind of very essential services like clean air, water filtrations, carbon storage and pollination, benefiting the communities on both sides of the borders. So we can say the forests and the wetlands just cross actually borders play a very crucial role in water regulations, preventing floods and droughts, and the supporting agriculture and drinking water supplies for neighboring countries also. Another is we can say combating illegal wildlife trade and the poaching. So many endangered species actually face threats from illegal poaching and wildlife trafficking. Corridors, by working together, neighboring countries can monitor and manage wildlife corridors more effectively, sharing data, enforcement efforts and resources to tackle these threats. So we can say joint patrols and the coordinated legal frameworks actually help reduce the wildlife crime in transboundary regions, thus creating safer environment for the threatened species. Another significance is promoting regional peace and cooperation. We can say that transboundary conservation initiatives foster collaboration between countries, thus actually building some kind of the trust and diplomatic relationships. These efforts can improve further regional stability, promote sustainable resource management, and even reduce, we can say, tension between the countries. Another we can say initiative is Peace Park, which are we can say protected areas spanning two or more countries or are often established in regions with a history of the conflict. So these areas we can say provide a shared goal of the conservation, thus actually promoting peace through environmental stewardship. Another is greater resource and the expertise for the conservation. We can say these transboundary conservation also help pool resources, knowledge and expertise from the multiple countries, thus leading to better management practices and improved scientific research. Shared responsibilities actually also help reduce cost of for each nations, thus providing economics of scale and the increasing access to funding from international donors who are often we can say more willing to support cross-border projects. Another we can say significance is holistic management of the shared ecosystems. So many ecosystems such as we can say river basins, forest and marine species or marine areas do not align with the political borders. So managing these ecosystems as a whole, we can say, rather than in a fragmented national portions, allow for more effective and holistic conservation strategies. For instance, we can say pollution from one country can impact water quality downstreams in another's. So our transboundary approach thus help ensure that the conservation efforts are coordinated to address these broader ecological challenges. Another we can say is enhanced protection for migratory species. Migratory species, as we know, like whales, butterflies, and different bird species and the marine turtles rely on specific routes and habitats across regions and the continents. So we can say protecting these routes through transboundary conservation initiatives ensures these species can complete the life cycles. Transboundary protected areas also provide, we can say, some kind of the safe passage that are actually very crucial rest stops and breeding sites that are essential to these migratory journeys. Another we can say is improved ecosystem monitoring and data sharing. We can say transboundary conservation projects facilitate joint research initiatives that actually standardize the data collection and monitoring across borders. This also lead to deeper understanding of ecosystem health, species populations and environmental threats. We can say sharing data on biodiversity, climate impacts and land use actually change across border enables better informed decisions makings and allows actually nation to adapt to change in real time. transboundary ecosystem. Some well-known transboundary ecosystem that exemplify these benefits, we can say, is the Amazon basins that actually shared by the 9 South American countries, which provide some kind of the critical biodiversity, carbon storage and the water resources. Another is the greater Virunga landscapes spanning in Uganda, Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo, that actually home to endangered mountain gorillas and the various large mammal species. So another example of the significance of this transboundary ecosystem is the Wadden Sea, a coastal wetland actually shared by the Denmark, Germany and the Netherlands, that actually very crucial for the migratory birds in eastern Atlantic flyway. We can say transboundary ecosystems are fundamental for biodiversity conservation because they ensure ecological connectivity, support genetic diversity and also enhance climate resilience and fosters international collaborations. We can say by viewing ecosystems as interconnected natural landscapes rather than, we can say, divided by borders, transboundary conservation helps actually preserve biodiversity at a very larger scale necessary for, we can say, suitable and long-term conservation. We can say some of the there are, we can say, several international organizations actually play a very key role in supporting actually transboundary biodiversity conservation and management. We can say by different means, by fostering cooperations, by funding projects, by setting guidelines and by providing a platform for the dialogues. So here we are some of the, we can say, prominent organizations that we are going to discuss in the today's lectures. Let's start from, we can say, United Nations Environmental Program. This United Nations Environmental Program actually promotes environmental sustainability and coordinates international environmental efforts, including, we can say, transboundary biodiversity management. It also supports various biodiversity initiatives that actually help countries to develop policies and facilitate cooperation on issues like ecosystem protection, habitat restorations and pollution control. Another is, we can say, is the International Union for Conservation of the Natures. IUCN is actually global authority on the status of the natural world and works with the government as well as non-government organizations to conserve the biodiversity. Through its, we can say, Transboundary Protected Areas program, IUCN actually supports cross-border conservation initiatives, offering guidance on creating and managing transboundary protected areas and peace parks. IUCN also provide, we can say, tools and some kind of assessments like the red list of the threatened species to inform transboundary conservation planning. Another organizations that play a very crucial role in transboundary conservation and management is the Conventional Biological Diversity. The CBD is actually a multilateral treaty aimed at conserving biodiversity, thus ensuring its sustainable use and sharing benefits fairly. The Aichi Biodiversity Targets and the Kunming Monitoring Global Biodiversity Framework of 2022 actually emphasizes the importance of transboundary cooperations, thus urging countries to protect ecosystems across borders through collaborative approaches and thus creating protected corridors for the wildlife species to thrive and survive. Another organizations that work important for, we can say, transboundary conservation is World Wildlife Fund. International WWF is a very, we can say, prominent organization that actually work in this field from many decades. It's an international NGO that actually works on the biodiversity conservation, including numerous transboundary conservation projects. It focuses on actually ecosystems that span on multiple countries such as Amazon rainforest and the Mekong river basins, thus facilitating cooperation between nations to address issues like habitat loss, illegal wildlife trade and water management. Another organization that work on it is UNESCO World Heritage Center. UNESCO actually administers the designation of the World Heritage Sites, which include many transboundary sites of ecological importance. So we can say by working with the government, this UNESCO establish and manage these sites. UNESCO also helps countries to collaborate so that they can protect the shared ecosystems and the cultural heritage of these transboundary ecosystems. Another is Ramsar Convention on the Wetlands. This is an international treaty focuses on the conservation and sustainable use of the wetlands, many of which are actually transboundaries. The Ramsar Convention designates actually wetland of international importance and thus encouraging the cross-border cooperations in wetland managements, thus providing some kind of the guidance for sustainable use of these critical habitats. Another organization that work for transboundary conservation is Convention on Migratory Species. This CMS is also known as the Bone Convention. CMS is actually dedicated to conserving migratory species across the range, which often include multiple countries, because the boundaries are for, we can say, for the human beings, for the not for the animals. So CMS actually thus facilitates transboundary conservation actions for migratory birds, mammals, fish and numerous other species, thus establishing some kind of the agreement to protect migratory corridors and habitats along their routes. Another is, we can say, the Global Environmental Facility. The GEF provides actually some kind of the financial resources for the project related to the biodiversity, climate change and other environmental issues, thus often focusing on transboundary ecosystems. It funds initiatives like transboundary water programs and biodiversity focal areas that actually supports regional cooperation on issues such as marine and freshwater management, forest conservation and invasive species control. Another is BirdLife International. This BirdLife International is a global partnership of the conservation organizations that actually focused on the conservation of the birds and their habitats. It manages projects in important bird and biodiversity areas, including transboundary important bird areas, and work with the partners to create protected corridors and the habitats across border for migratory bird species. Although we can say there are many other organizations also work on transboundary biodiversity managements. Here I have discussed a few of them. So these organizations actually work to enhance the conservation of the ecosystems that actually cross political boundaries, support species that migrate across countries, and also help align environmental policies and the practices across regions. What are the challenges actually in transboundary conservations? Here I will discuss some of the challenges in the conservation of these transboundary ecosystems. First is sovereignty issues. Countries may have, we can say, conflicting interests regarding control and access to the resources, thus creating some kind of the tensions over the jurisdiction and the management in transboundary ecosystems. Another challenge is differing legal frameworks. So we can say the conservation laws, policies and enforcement actually vary significantly between countries, thus actually leading some kind of the challenge in standardizing conservation practices. Another is coordination and the collaborations. We can say effective managements of transboundary protected areas or transboundary ecosystems require some kind of, we can say, collaboration across political boundaries, which can be hindered by political conflicts, lack of trust or inadequate communication mechanisms. Another, we can say, is funding and resource allocations. Securing and sharing financial resources among countries can be a complex things, with each country having a, we can say, different funding priorities as well as the budget constraints. Other challenges are ecological and environmental challenges. We can say habitat fragmentation, human activities like infrastructure development, just like we can say roads, fences and land use change can fragment habitats, thus actually disrupting the wildlife movements and the migration routes across borders. So another is inconsistent conservation practices. Variation, we can say, in conservation approaches like fire management, poaching policies can actually disrupt the ecosystem, thus actually impacting the biodiversity and the ecological health of transboundary ecosystems. Another is the spread of the invasive species. We can say invasive species such as pests and disease can move across borders more freely, thus necessitating the coordinated management practices that may actually be difficult to implement in these transboundary ecosystems. Another is, we can say, socio-economic challenge. We can say in this we have a local community involvements, indigenous, and we can say local communities often have historical and cultural connections to these lands, and cross-border actually managements efforts may ignore their needs or restrict their traditional land use. This is another challenge. We can say another is economic disparities. Countries involved in, we can say, transboundary protected areas may have different levels of the economic developments, impacting, we can say, funding capacity and prioritization of the conservation versus the development. Another is tourism management. Tourism is often, we can say, promoted in transboundary protected areas, but differing regulation as well as the infrastructures between countries can lead to unequal economic benefits and environmental strain. Another is security and enforcement challenge. We can say poaching and illegal trade. These transboundary protected areas can be a focus for the wildlife poaching and illegal trade in plants, animals, and the natural resources. We can say desperate enforcement and surveillance capacities across border can hinder effective controls. Another is conflict and instability. We can say political instability, armed conflict, and terrorism is one or more countries can also threaten both conservation and the safety of the personnel and tourists within transboundary protected areas. Another is law enforcement and coordinations. Coordinating law enforcement efforts across border, we can say, is challenging due to differences in legal systems, language barriers, and the resource availability. Another is administrative and the operational challenge, data sharing and the monitoring. Countries may have different system for, we can say, data collection, monitoring, and the reporting, making it, we can say, challenging to assess the ecological health of the areas constantly. Capacity building and the training. Differences in conservation expertise and the resource availability means some countries may need capacity building sports which can be difficult to provide or coordinate. Another is cross-border access restrictions. Restriction on the movement of the peoples and the goods between countries actually can limit giant conservation activities, including research, patrolling, and resource sharing. Another is, we can say, climate change. That is, one is differential impacts. Climate change can affect regions actually unevenly, influencing species distributions, water resources, and vegetation patterns, thus making giant adaptation strategies actually complex and challenging in transboundary ecosystem managements. Another is resource scarcity and the migrations. We can say the climate-driven scarcity of the resources such as water can lead to increased human and wildlife migrations across borders, thus stressing conservation efforts and increasing human-wildlife conflict in these areas. Another is conflicting land use demands and the infrastructure developments. We can say conflicting land use demands and infrastructure development refer to the competition for the land between different uses such as agriculture, urban development, conservation, and infrastructure projects like roads and the buildings. This can lead to significant challenge in planning and the resource management. We can say effective management of these conflicting demands required collaboration among stakeholders, thus needs adaptive planning and a commitment to sustainable development that recognizes the interconnectedness of the land use, infrastructure, and environmental health. Another is resource extractions interest and the agriculture expansions. We can say the resource extraction interest and the agriculture expansions refer to the, we can say, the competing demands for the land and resource between the activities such as mining, logging, and fossil fuel extractions, and the need for the agriculture productions to support food security. We can say the finding a balance between the resource extraction and the agriculture expansion requires thoughtful planning, collaborations, and the commitment to sustainable practices that actually protect both the environment and the local communities. We can say in the last that this transboundary biodiversity management or conservation represent a complex but crucial aspects of global conservation efforts. So success requires a combination of the political will, institutional cooperations, technical innovations, and community engagements. We can say while challenge remains significant in these transboundary ecosystems, we can say there is a need for emerging solutions and the successful case studies that actually demonstrate the potential for effective transboundary conservations. So some of the key factors for future success includes strengthened international cooperations, there is need to enhance technological integrations, there is also need to improve the funding mechanisms, there is also need for greater community involvement, and other laws we can say there is a need for adaptive management approaches. The future of the, we can say that this transboundary biodiversity management lies in developing more integrated, innovative and inclusive approaches that can address both current challenges and emerging threats while also promoting sustainable development and the conservation goals. So with these, dear students, we end today's lecture, and in the next lecture we will discuss some new interesting topic. Thank you. Thank you, dear students.